Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Image Out Readout, number 2 of 4 events that we'll be holding. For those of you who tried to join us last week, we had some major technical difficulties, which I think involved a checkbox in Zoom. But you had to find the right one. So thanks for coming back this week. For those of you who might have not been able to join us last week and are here this week, thanks for joining us. We're so pleased to have this live audience and to be able to bring you what is a very diverse group of readers tonight. Just as a reminder, like I said, this is the second of 4 events. The next one will be on September 17th at 7 p.m., so mark your calendars. Really excited to have 5 readers with us tonight. They are Shelley Stoehr-McCarthy, Christopher Soden, Laurel Johanson, Rick Allen Wilson, and Rosi di Rienzo. And tonight's readers are all not in Rochester. They're not from Rochester, which is a really great way to highlight the fact that ImageOutWrite every year accepts submissions from an international group of readers. And there's always a wonderfully international, national publication. So I'll be telling you a little bit more about that as we go along tonight. Next up, I want to welcome our community partner from Writers and Books. We have Chris Fanning tonight. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Jamie. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. How are you doing tonight?
Doing well. Sad to see the end of summer here. It's surreal.
It is kind of crazy that it's already August 20th. How is that possible?
No idea.
No idea. What has Writers and Books been up to this summer?
So for those of you who don't know about Writers and Books, we are Rochester, New York's home for the literary arts. We host writing workshops, summer camps for kids ages 5 to 18. We have a visiting author series. We do different sorts of book clubs. And until recently, all of that was done at our headquarters at 740 University Avenue. And since March, we have been completely virtual. So, yeah.
How is that to go virtual? Does it really affect how you can work with the writers? I would think particularly with youth, but well, maybe even adults.
Yeah, surprisingly, it's been a very interesting pivot for us. We've had, people starting to attend our workshops from all over the country and all over the world, which has been incredible for our small nonprofit in Rochester to suddenly have this global reach. So I personally was teaching some youth camps through our youth camp program called Summerite this summer. And I had kids from California, I had kids from Massachusetts, I had kids from Colorado, all getting up and attending camps virtually, which before then were not possible for them. And we're seeing the same thing with our adult workshops too. So it's very exciting. And one other thing I wanted to plug is our visiting author series, which I mentioned is all virtual now. And which has really opened doors, as an example tonight of your readers, to have so many people from around the country being able to come to Writers and Books and share their work with our audiences and audiences all over the world. So it's been exciting, it's been crazy, but very exciting.
Do you have any events coming up that our audience should know about?
Yeah, we have
like specific dates or anything you want them to know?
Yeah, we have we're just launching these new series on our website, so I don't have the dates off the top of my head, but if you go and visit us at wab.org, you can find all the information on our visiting author series. You can find we're doing starting to run workshops with Cave Canem, which is one of the Black poetry meccas of the country, located in New York, and we're going to have some of their fellows teaching workshops through Writers and Books in this brand new partnership, which is amazing. We're also partnering with Boa Editions, which is the poetry publishing house in Rochester, and we'll be doing some virtual readings with their authors as well, who, again, are all over the country. So again, I'm sorry I don't have the dates in front of me, but if you go to our website, wab.org, you can find information there. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Writers and Books.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
And I know that we'll see you again at one of our events. because we're always doing great partnerships together.
So happy we're finally doing this.
Yeah, it's very wonderful. All right. Well, next up, I want to introduce our first reader, and that's Shelley Stoehr-McCarthy. She's joining us from Connecticut tonight. Shelley is a writer and teacher and the mother of 2 transgender children, Ren and Luca. A documentary about their transitions is now being broadcast at PBS World's channel on America Reframed, the series called America Reframed, which is kind of an amazing experience. How did that come about, Shelley? You have to unmute yourself still, yep.
Got it. Yeah, when my son first came out about 5 years ago, a friend of mine who had worked at the New York Post, I had written this piece, and a friend of mine who saw it spoke to some friends at the New York Post, and one of them was also working at NBC. So they were going to do this kind of video diary thing of my son. And then my son had some health problems, had some suicide attempts, and they backed out. But the point person knew this director had been his student, and just put him in touch. He came up, and my daughter had just come out then, and ended up being more the focal point than my son was, actually.
Yeah, we've had some very powerful documentaries that I've seen through our film festival, and I would think that that's really eye-opening for people to be able to see somebody's experience, and so wonderful that your family is willing to share that through a documentary.
It was really it was a good experience for us. It's nice for us now to be able to look back and see, you know, how different we are now, because the kids have transitioned like 5 years ago. So it's a completely different picture of our family than it was then.
Yeah, it would be great to do a follow-up. Well, I will turn it over to you now and allow you to take over and do your reading.
Okay. So hi, thank you for having me. My name is Shelley Stoehr, and I'm reading a piece that I had written about 5 years ago when my son had come out as transgender. This is the first time actually I'll be using his birth name in about 5 years. So if I stumble a little bit, that's why. Rainy is Luca, when my daughter became my son, a mother's perspective on having a transgender child. It was a Thursday, 8:45 in the morning. My daughter Rainy had just left on the bus for middle school. I said goodbye to the other parents, crossed the street, and went back inside to begin work. I was a freelance writer and editor at the time, working from home. My office is the desk and shelf combo in the corner of my bedroom. I sat down in my cat-scratched swivel chair, kicked off my shoes, and pulled out my laptop. On top lay a folded sheet of paper. Odd. I opened it partway. Across the fold, it read in blue glitter gel ink, "Urgent, read ASAP." Clearly from my daughter, Rainy. Opening the final fold, I expected a bright blue, "I love you, Mommy," on the inside. Instead, I read, "Dear Mommy and Daddy, I have something to tell you. I'm telling you in this note because even though I feel like I'll be happier after you know, I'm also going to feel really awkward for a while, and you guys probably will too. Before I start, I want you to know a few things. I'm not experimenting. I know you guys like to say things like it's normal to experiment at this age, but I'm not. This is who I am. Secondly, I want you to know that while I strongly believe that this is not a phase, I want it to be okay if it is. Someday, whether it be tomorrow or 10 years from now, I may feel differently. If it really is a phase, then I want you guys to be okay with that." By this point, my mouth had gone dry and my stomach was in knots. I was shaking. What was this, a suicide note? Had she run away? Was she pregnant? I read on. As you know, transgender is a term used to describe someone who is seemingly in the wrong body. In short, when someone's gender identity doesn't match their biological sex. I've grown up as a girl, but in the past few months, I've felt strange. I've been more comfortable thinking of myself as a boy with the name Luca. I'm still the same person. I still like makeup. I still like Hello Kitty. I still may wear a dress to dinner dance. I still want to do everything I wanted to do before, but now as a boy. And in the future, maybe you could start referring to me as your son and using male pronouns. It would make me a lot happier. I know it would. Sorry if this is really overwhelming, and I'm sorry this is such a big change. Signed, Luca Nicholas McCarthy. I'm almost embarrassed to say my first reaction was to laugh. I'm not sure what it was that I had going on that day, car trouble, money trouble, or what, but I do know that reading that my little girl was really a boy was too much to bear in that moment. It broke me and I laughed. I showed the letter to a friend, called my mother, called another friend, waited for Rainey to get home from school and my husband, Chris, from work. I cried. Chris and I tried to be supportive, but we didn't have the information to be reasonable at first. We suggested that instead of Luca, Rainey change her name to Rain with an E, a boy's name. We researched binders and what it meant to be gender fluid. I emailed and Googled and read and watched videos. Gradually, I came to terms with Rainey being a boy. And when I was ready, a surprisingly short few days later, I said, okay, you're a boy. To my surprise, and with tears rolling down her cheeks, Rainey said, forget it. I just want everything to go back to the way it was. Seriously, I thought. After all of this, Rainey was remaining Rainey? What the hell? But all I said out loud was, okay, fine. And that was that, or so I thought. But then summer came and Rainey got picked up for shoplifting. High school started and she seemed to be doing well, but at the beginning of October, I checked her grades online and discovered that she was failing 2 of her 4 classes. This was a child who'd always excelled in school, a child who, though now failing English, was also writing a novel and reading every night. A smart, capable child who was failing out of high school with a criminal record. What the fuck is wrong with my kid? I wanted to know. When I told a friend what was going on with Rainey, she said that typically when a kid starts acting out the way Rainey had, that there's something deeper going on, but I didn't know what it was. And then one night, about a week later, she said under her breath, as if she didn't want me to hear, I know why I'm failing at school. If you know, you should tell me, I said. I don't want you to overreact, she said. I'm already overreacting. Nothing you can tell me will be worse than what I've already imagined, which was true. I'd imagined Rainey molested, raped, pregnant, on drugs. My mind had been spinning for days. I'm still Luca, said my daughter. Oh, I said. Okay, then. Okay, what? Okay, you're Luca. You're a boy. Fine. Fine? He said. Yes, fine. Now get your English grade up. Thank you.
Ellie, thank you for sharing that story and for being, I'm not crying, a supportive parent. Yeah, so what brought you to writing? Because I think telling powerful stories is really important.
I think I've really written, really since I started writing in like 2nd grade, I was writing stories. I'm primarily a fiction writer. This is the only the only kind of memoirish piece that I've ever written. So mostly I write novels. I've been writing some poetry lately, but this I felt was important. It was certainly important in our family's life.
Definitely important. What are you currently working on?
I'm currently writing a novel, and I'm working on selling my last novel. And I'm also teaching at Southern Connecticut State University.
Nice.
So, and I have a chapbook. So I'm always trying to, write daily and trying to participate with writing communities and all of that stuff as much as I can.
Thank you so much for being part of ImageOutWrite.
Thank you so much.
If you're interested in Shelley's piece, it's in volume 7 of our ImageOutWrite journals, which are still available. Shelley is not able to stay with us tonight, so I just want to thank you so much for being with us tonight and for coming back for a 2nd week, and again for sharing your family's story with the world.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Hopefully we'll see you soon. Next up is Christopher Soden. Christopher Stephen Soden on my list here received his MFA in poetry from Vermont College of Fine Arts in January of 2005. Still not used to saying that. He teaches craft, theory, genre, and literature. And tonight, Christopher is joining us from Texas. Welcome, Christopher.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm stoked to be here. I'm very excited.
Yeah, the piece that you're reading tonight was in volume 8 of ImageOutWrite. What brought you to submit to the journal?
Well, as a matter of fact, I believe I saw that you guys were looking for submissions through Duotrope. And so that was when I saw that, then I knew I had to submit. And I should tell you though, I chose something that was not in ImageOutWrite. I wanted to read something different.
That's great.
Oh, cool.
So if you want to read something else by Christopher, get volume 8. But tonight we're going to hear something different. So I will let you read your piece, Christopher, and I will go away.
Oh, thank you, Jamie.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. Hello. Good evening, everyone. I know some of you are probably wondering why all of those boxes are there behind me. And really, the answer is very simple. I broke into someone's house to borrow their webcam. So I'm going to read this poem. It's called The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. And I should give you a bit of background. The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis was a very popular sitcom in the late 50s and early 60s. So I'll be getting the lingo from that time in American history and American pop culture. And Dobie Gillis was a teenage boy who dated a lot of different girls at the same time, if you know what I mean. And I, as a young gay boy, had a huge crush on him. So anyway, the title of this poem is The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. The other guys razzed me for chasing skirt, but they couldn't deny I had the knack. I knew what girls needed to hear and how to pitch it. Last Tuesday after lunch, some new guy at school named Roger ducked into the John for a Chesterfield. His hair was coal black and curly, his cologne sharp as cut lime and cloves. I took the smoke he offered me, and he showed me how to inhale without coughing. He could have laughed at me, but didn't. That night, Roger took me to a Negro jazz club called Jelly Rolls, where they chuckled and brought us nasty hooch, while the band jammed to Count Basie and Cab Calloway. He asked me about Thalia. Where do you touch? What is her mouth like? He grinned and winked. I'm starting to bone. There were sailors dancing slow with their honeys, hair getting damp, calm and floating like terns on a trade wind. He said the lake was much cooler. Now it was so far into the night, and we could talk without shouting. The moon was a luminous fossil, and Roger joined me when I left his blue Mustang to aim a piss. We used daffodils for a target, dousing them and farting like guys do, breaking up laughing. I climbed up next to him on the top of his trunk. He started to sing Nat King Cole. The dream has ended. Then he tugged my zipper and reached in, tickling my cock with 2 fingers. I socked his ear fiercely, but he just smiled his tongue wrapped in garlic and onion and coffee bean. I said, okay, Roger, sure. As I thickened in his grip, spunk escaped in ragged jets. He tucked his nose in the hollow below my throat, and ridiculous, impossible tears got me snotty and hoarse. He mopped me with his hanky, and I said, sorry for your ear. He began to serenade me again, and I quit talking. His skin turned to satin and blue moon glow. I was gone for good. Thank you.
Christopher, thank you. It's always like illuminating to me to hear somebody read a piece, because you get all of these wonderful visuals that come through, and I'm very much a visual person. So to have all these images come to my mind is really wonderful. I love the satin blue moon glow at the end there.
Thank you.
What are you working on currently?
I'm trying to put together a manuscript for my second collection of poetry. It's called Monkey Brothers, and I'm working with another poet. He's kind of walking me through it and helping me choose which ones I want to use. His name is Eduardo Corral, and I just finished taking a workshop with him. There were 5 of us, 5 men, and we all brought our poetry manuscripts to the workshop. So I'm trying to figure out what I want to put in and what I want to take out, and he's giving me lots of good advice.
I would think that must be hard to self-edit, because if you have something you really love that maybe doesn't fit with other things, to try to figure out, like, do I keep it in this volume, or do I table it and hope that it fits in later, like building a good album or something like that?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Because just because you're really crazy about something you've written and, it has a special place in your heart, maybe it doesn't fit in the dramatic arc. And so you have to be grown up, and even though you don't want to be.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight and for sharing your work with us. And again, if you want to read something else by Christopher, it's in volume 8 of ImageOutWrite.
Yes,
we'll see you in a little bit. For those who are viewing tonight, if you have any questions for any of the readers, again, Shelley couldn't stay with us, but all the other readers will be sticking around. And if we have time, I can ask a few questions here at the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Facebook chat, and my people out there in the world will get them to me. Our next reader tonight is Laurel Johanson, who's joining us from Manitoba, Canada. So it makes us international for tonight.
Very exotic, yes.
Very exotic. Did you grow up in Manitoba?
I grew up in Ontario.
In Ontario?
Americans might be more familiar with Ontario. But yeah, I've lived in Manitoba for the past 20 years, so.
Nice. What took you there then?
My dad got a job, so we moved.
Yeah. That happens. Is writing your day job?
It kind of is, yeah. I work in advertising, so I do write every day, not obviously the same kind of stuff I'll be reading today, but yeah, I write ads for a living. I'm really lucky to be able to do that, and writing has always been kind of my passion, even from a very young age. So yeah, I'm super excited to be reading something tonight.
Excellent. Well, I just realized I did not read your bio, so I will do that quickly. And then I will turn it over to you. Laurel Johanson is a writer, producer, and communications professional living in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where when she's not dreaming up elaborate and sometimes ridiculous stories, she can be found curled up in a chair with a good book and her cat, Tormund Giantsbane. Yeah?
Yes, that's a Game of Thrones reference for any Game of Thrones fans out there. I named my cat after the big ginger warrior, Tormund Giantsbane. And he's around. He might be making a cameo. He's been kind of causing trouble, so I apologize if he messes something up.
I think any meeting I've ever been in, if somebody's pet or child appears, everybody's super excited. So
yeah,
so no worries, no worries.
Alrighty. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from a short story I wrote called Cinderella. And spoiler alert, this is from the end of the story. So it's one of my protagonists. She works at a fast food restaurant. She's finally able to go to a party that the girl she likes is at. So without further ado. I cabbed for 25 minutes to get to Nightingale Lane, but spent another 15 minutes with my cab driver up front debating whether or not to actually go inside. You getting out? He asked me. I didn't respond at first. I was fidgeting in my heels that were already blistering my feet, even though I'd barely walked in them. Maybe I'll just go back, I told him, though I was still staring at the house out the cab window. You came all this way, he said. Why would you want to go back? In the end, I pictured Carly beating that lizard guy's ass with a wet mop and decided that if she could do that for me, I could at least walk up the steps and through the front door past a few drunk strangers for her. My cab fare ended up being more than my entire night's wages because of my stalling, but I decided it was worth it when I saw her, running up to me in the warm golden glow of the fairy lights draped across the archway to the living room. It's you, Cinderella said. I barely recognized you. Is that good or bad? I asked her. You cleaned up good, she said, smiling. I like your dress. What are you supposed to be? Huh? I said. Your costume, she said. Did you forget it's Halloween? Oh, I honestly had. I guess I'm a bridesmaid. I wonder if Cinderella had bridesmaids at her wedding, she said seriously. She took my arm and we ventured deeper into the 70s-style home to its turquoise linoleum kitchen. Cinderella bypassed the glass punch bowl and went straight for an amber-colored bottle, pouring a shot each into 2 little red cups. Bottoms up, she said as she handed one to me. I did mine over the sink because I'd only started drinking last year when I turned 17, and hard liquor did not agree with me yet. Dance with me? Cinderella asked, while I was still grimacing from my whiskey-burned throat. Yeah, my voice cracked like a little boy's. She laughed and led me to a crowded wood-paneled living room with orange shag carpet and an old record player in a glass case in the corner. Music was coming from somewhere else, a phone probably, but the record player put a goofy smile on my face for some reason. It made me feel almost nostalgic, but that made no sense because I wasn't even alive in the 70s. Maybe it was just the liquor and Cinderella's hands on my shoulders giving me that warm longing for a place I'd never been before. You took way longer than 20 minutes, she yelled over the music. I got a little lost, I tried to tell her, but she didn't hear me. What? I smiled and shook my head, and we danced until I realized I was still wearing those ridiculous heels. Cinderella knelt down in front of me in her dress and helped me slip them off, laughing and throwing them over her shoulder when she did. 2 hours and 3 more shots later, I became even more convinced that hard liquor didn't agree with me. What's wrong? Cinderella yelled, her hands secure on my shoulders while we swayed. I'm gonna lie down, I responded, reluctantly waving her hands away. I stumbled down the long hallway, dizzied by the green floral wallpaper, and managed to find the nearest bed. I didn't realize at first that it was already occupied by dozens of coats, but I found them oddly comforting and decided to nestle right into the pile. I thought of that weird old man that had writhed around in the milkshakes back at Fatty Patty. Maybe I'd make it onto someone else's crazy list one of these days. Maybe I already had. I burrowed deeper and deeper until all I saw was black. It reminded me a little of when I used to hide in the closet when I was younger while my parents fought. The darkness had always helped clear my head for some reason. Maybe because it's easier to think about your problems when they aren't right there staring you in the face. Maybe that was cowardly of me to think that way. I felt someone lie down on the bed beside me, so I poked my head out. Cinderella was lying on her back, staring at something on the ceiling. She turned her head toward me and screamed as soon as she saw my face among the coats. Her screams quickly turned to laughter, though. She perched herself on her elbows and looked down at me. Are you hiding? She asked, poking my face with warm fingers. Stop that, I said, swatting her hand away. I'm not hiding. Not anymore. Not from you. Were you passed out? Well, pardon me then, Sleeping Beauty. She snuggled up beside me on the pile of coats. Wow, this is actually pretty cozy. We lie there for a few minutes like that until I convinced myself she'd finally had enough of me, had probably fallen asleep beside me, wouldn't remember anything about me in the morning. What's your name? She finally asked in barely a whisper. I felt her warm whiskey breath on my neck, so I turned my head. Isabella, I said, as her fingers grazed my chin. I took her hand in mine and laced those fingers with my own. She turned to look at the clock beside us on the bed, then looked back at me. It's 3:33, Isabella. Make a wish. I wish I'd kissed Cinderella at midnight, I said. There's still time, she said. I haven't turned into a pumpkin yet. That's actually not what happens in the story, I tried to explain, but she kissed me, so I took that to mean she didn't really care for fairy tales anyway. And that is it.
Thank you, Laurel.
Thank you.
When you started off saying that she worked at a fast food restaurant, I thought, there's not many stories about people that work at fast food restaurants.
And there needs to be more.
Right?
I know.
And then she's debating it out with the cab driver. I was like, I like this. It's all like very present day, like here we are.
Yeah, straight back to that teenage angst and being in the closet, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And a pair of heels always creates blisters.
Always. There's never any comfy heels. Yeah, I don't know.
You gotta wear them until they stop doing that, and that sucks.
I know, I feel that.
Are you currently writing anything for other submissions or anything like that? What are you working on?
I mean, yes, I mostly write to try to stay sane these days, as probably a lot of us do. And I do write for my work, so I'm lucky that I get to write, yeah, like I said, every day. But yeah, I wrote a novel and I'm kind of toying with the idea of a sequel to that right now. So yeah, I got a few things on the go, but
I would imagine your day job, though, writing is different than this kind of more creative writing.
Yeah, 100%.
In some way, yeah.
You'd be surprised at how much they kind of bleed into each other. Like the more creative writing you do, I feel like the more improved your professional writing becomes. So it's kind of fun to have the both sides and then see how they work together. Yeah.
Nice. It's a good way to think about it. Well, Laurel's work is in volume 7 of ImageOutWrite. And again, if you have questions for Laurel, please drop them in the chat. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for a second week in a row, even though we didn't go live last week. And we'll see you again in a bit.
Thanks, guys.
Next up is Rick Allen Wilson. He is a writer, actor, producer, director, musician, and educator. Having grown up in a fundamentalist Christian household in Oklahoma, he now makes his home in Long Island with his partner, Chris Leidenfrost. They're four dogs, and their far too overcrowded vegetable garden, which I think everybody right now would be super jealous of. How are you tonight, Rick?
I'm great, Jamie. It's just wonderful being here and hearing so many amazing writers out there. It's just incredible. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm always blown away, always.
Me too.
So fundamentalist Christian background in Oklahoma, and then you end up in Long Island. What path did you take there?
Oh, it was an incredibly unorthodox one. I was a young pianist who then went to study music in Seattle. From there, I went to study theater, where I studied classical acting in London for 2 years. And then I moved to New York in 1986 and acted for quite a while before transitioning into education. So.
Wow, yeah. That is a very unorthodox path. That's okay, though. I think sometimes the life paths that just lead you along are the ones that are the best.
Absolutely. And yeah. I'm not done. I'm looking forward to whatever's next.
Yeah, and probably also feeds your writing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you read your work, and I'll come back in a minute.
Wonderful. Okay. This is, the following excerpt is a memoir from a piece called The Wind at Our Backs. It's about the first time I fell in love at 18 as a closeted fundamentalist Christian kid in Oklahoma and had my heart horribly broken. I did not know he already had a partner. Plus, after we broke up, I had to live with him all that summer at an opera camp. I'm a pianist and he was a singer. He slept with a man and a woman that summer while I had thoughts of suicide. 12 years later, he died of AIDS. The title comes from a bike ride we once took. Sometimes when Oklahoma is not the Oklahoma where tornadoes come sweeping down the plains, it can have some of the most beautiful weather imaginable. Sometimes you get a series of days which belong to a different season altogether. This day was one of those days, 84 degrees and brilliantly sunny smack in the dead of winter. We were college boys and seized the day. We jumped on bikes and headed into the glorious Oklahoma countryside. We were about 20 miles out of town when we decided to turn back. Only then did we realize that a powerful tailwind had been at our backs. The wind was so strong that it took us an hour to go 1 mile on the return trip. And we ultimately had to call for help. Fast forward 3 months, he broke my heart. At the end of that summer, I packed my car and left Oklahoma to get away from him. Fast forward 12 years, and I randomly bumped into him one Christmas. It took only a second to recognize him, though so much can happen in 1 second. In that second, I forgave him everything. I realized before I could smile and say hello, he was profoundly ill. He was no longer the blue-eyed all-American who had driven me to distraction during my first year of college. Instead, his face was thin and gaunt. His emaciated body read like a medical chart, with his prognosis writ large for all the world to see. This was 1992. There was little doubt about what his appearance meant. It's one of the great blessings of my life that we ended up spending the next afternoon together. He tried to cancel on me because he was suddenly overwhelmed with guilt for how cruel he had been to me. But I could not have him enduring his final days thinking I had not forgiven him. An unexpected challenge for me, though, was that he kept making snide comments about a coat I was wearing. It was so annoying. I had gotten it at a thrift store in Manhattan. I suppose it was out of place in Manhattan, or in Oklahoma rather, but man, his comments kept bugging me. Over lunch, the closest we came to discussing the past was simply him saying he didn't understand what had motivated him back then. That's it, that's all. This excerpt next is from the end of the piece. When Noah and I got back to his mother's house, he took my coat and told his mother we were going to his room. As we walked into his bedroom, my eyes immediately went to a collection of photos on a bureau. One photo in particular caught my attention, but Noah didn't seem to notice. Instead, he said he remembered something he needed to tell his mom and he would be right back. He left and I stepped toward the photos. I had forgiven him so much, but there, among the most loved people in his life, was Sharon. She was the girl he had had sex with all that summer at the opera camp, while he was simultaneously banging the baritone who shared the upper loft of the barn with me. I'd forgiven him for having loved other men instead of me, but it had not crossed my mind that I would need to forgive him Sharon too. Noah came back. I casually asked about her, and he said they were in constant touch. They had visited each other frequently through the years. He then said he was tired and needed to lie down. I said I should go, but he didn't want me to. He said I should stay. if I was okay having him shutting his eyes for a bit. I said, of course, I'd be happy to stay. He lay on his bed and closed his eyes. I sat in a chair, staring at the photos as he fell asleep. I studied his walls, his furniture, his room, and finally, him. Now that he was asleep, I was free to really look at him. It was overwhelming how far he had declined. He seemed 30 pounds lighter and 30 years older. No longer the good-looking college boy who had made heads turn on campus. I looked at the bones of his hands and remembered those hands so well. I remembered his hair, his skin, his voice, his laugh, his touch. His skeletal structure was now replacing all the beauty he once owned. I wondered what unseen wounds were lurking below the blanket, but I did not want the answer. One of us would survive this epidemic, one would not. I would start my career as a teacher in September. He would die in October. As I looked around his room one last time, I realized I would have no one with whom I could share my grief when he passed. No one to whom I could say, I loved this guy so much. This is what he was to me. But what was he really? There are no words in our language to define what one confused young man is to another confused young man. His boyfriend, his lover, his friend. No word can define what I unwittingly became as Noah betrayed his commitment to Jack and turned instead to me and broke my heart. No words can describe the darkness of my soul I succumbed to when I confronted him late one night of that summer, and we came to blows, fighting, punching, and slapping on a moonlit mountain highway a quarter mile from the opera camp in Arkansas. I looked again at Sharon's picture. How would she see or define me? Or was I even significant enough for her to need to? About 20 minutes later, I stood and walked over to the bed. I wanted to get in it with him, to hold him one last time. He might allow it. He might not. I might regret it. He might. An act so intimate might be very wrong for either of us. Instead, I just touched his shoulder and said, hey. He opened his eyes, looked up at me and smiled. Hey, he replied. I told him I needed to go. He insisted on getting up and walking me to the front door. I told him not to, but there was no dissuading him. As we got to the living room, we thanked each other for a wonderful day and promised to write. We promised to stay in touch, and we did for the next 10 months. He hugged me and said, get home safe. It was awkward to have to remind him, but finally I had to say, so I guess I just need my coat. He smiled and looked at me softly. What coat? What do you mean, what coat? I don't remember you having a coat. The one you've been bashing all day. I don't know what you're talking about. Mom, Rip can't find his coat. Have you seen a really putrid army coat lying around? Now, just a second, his mom called from the kitchen, and man, was she a bad actress. Coat? Oh, what kind of coat? Army, Noah shouted. Kind of a putrid green. Gray, the coat is gray. Is he sure he was wearing it when he got here? Noah looked at me. Are you sure you were wearing it when you got here? He echoed. Noah, I need my coat. So I guess, trust me, he said, you don't need that coat. So I guess. His mom entered the kitchen doorway holding a beautiful blue hooded goose down jacket. Ta-da, Noah sang with a jazz hands flourish. Then he repeated and finished the sentence he'd previously started. So I guess you're just going to have to take this one. What? Take it, you need it. I've worn it maybe twice, 10 or 20 times at the most. His mother handed him the coat and disappeared back in the kitchen. I can't take your coat, Noah. You will take this coat or I'm going to get upset. There's no reason for you to get upset, but my doctors have warned me not to get upset, because if I get upset, oh my God, do people really let you get away with this? His mother shouted from the kitchen, you'd be amazed at what he gets. We hugged goodbye. It was snowing as I made my way down the sidewalk to my car. I started it, then got out and brushed the snow from the windshield. It dawned on me why he had given me the coat. There would be no articulated or reflective apologies. How can we apologize for that which we don't understand? Noah could send me into my future, though, with a coat, an extra protective skin that had once belonged to him. He was shedding it so he could go on. He gave it to me so I could too. When I remember Noah, my memory lands always on that February day when the weather changed from stinging, freezing winter to shimmering freedom and possibility. It was a day when two sons of Oklahoma took to the open road with the sun on our faces and the wind at our backs. I have the life now I wanted with Noah. I just don't have it with Noah. Noah and I were propelled by something beautiful and unseen that February afternoon, and we left our laughter imprinted on the blue skies and wheat-colored prairies of Oklahoma. Something wondrous was behind us during that ride, but now I understand what was against us as we turned our bikes and headed back against the wind. All the forces of a time and generation opposed us in a world which was not nearly ready. But we are prompted forward always, not only by the progressive gusts of change, but by the constant tailwinds of the past. Those lost and those buried, who dreamed dreams before ours, who hung their confusions on the clotheslines of a nation, that they may be seen and one day help give order to a great chaos. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, for sharing that piece. The ending, I think, is a good synopsis for what I was feeling the whole time, that I love that art and literature brings us this collective history that's personal, but timeless as well, and needed to document the things that we've all experienced. You mentioned that this was 1992, about when this was happening.
That is correct.
So when did you actually write this piece?
I wrote it actually over time. It was very hard, as you could imagine, very emotional for me to actually work on.
Yeah.
I would say I finished it about 5 years ago, and I would say that I worked on it off and on for probably about 7 years. So
it's very powerful, and it's the description and like all the tiny little personal bits, I think are really great to illuminate, again, this collective history that we have.
Absolutely. It's so important that we tell our stories.
Yeah, it's very important to tell our stories. Do you work on multiple pieces at the same time, or do you kind of focus on one thing? Are you working on something else?
My process is that I'll start certain things and finish them. I sometimes find things that I've written that are stuck in drawers and that sort of thing. And I'm very surprised by it, because I remember going to a reading that I did of a short play, and as I was watching it, I had not looked at it in years, and I was actually going, oh my gosh, how does this end? Because I couldn't even remember that. Right now I'm working on a memoir. It's a divorce memoir.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. My partner and I have an interesting story that we divorced, but we're actually back together. And so it's very much the journey of all of that.
Excellent. Well, it's something to look forward to in the future.
Thank you. I hope to finish that soon also.
Well, Rick's piece is in volume 8 of ImageOutWrite, and we'll see you again in a few minutes.
I'm sorry, actually, not that particular piece.
Not that particular piece, but a piece by you is in volume 8.
Exactly. The Lifeguard, a poem, is in that one.
Awesome. Something else to look forward to reading.
Thank
you. And our last reader tonight is Rosi di Rienzo, which I just butchered your last name again. I'm really sorry, Rosie. She's based in Brooklyn and is an educator who works through her residual teen angst by writing about young queers navigating this world and others. Her work has been featured in Autostraddle, The Thinks periodical, Queers in Space, which I love that title, and ImageOutWrite Volume 8. Thanks for joining us tonight, Rosie.
Thanks for having me. It's so great to be here.
Yeah. What are you want to give us a little synopsis, like a little lead into what you're reading tonight?
Yeah, so I'm going to be reading a short story called A Root in the Dark that I wrote. I had this really strong feeling about boarding school for some reason. I did not go to boarding school. I went to public school in Massachusetts, but I just was feeling like I don't know. I just felt this character who's just like this really angsty, as all my characters are, this angsty teenager who just cloistered in this boarding school in the mountains in Europe somewhere. And I wanted to talk to her.
That sounds amazing. I threw away all of my angsty teenager poetry when I found it. I actively tried to get rid of it because I didn't want to ever go back to high school. But I'm glad that other people are channeling that self and putting it out there in the world.
It's therapy, Hi, Dad. Love you.
Well, I will let you take it away and read your work, and I'll come back in a few minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is a short story that will take me about 15 minutes to read, which I know I don't have that much time, so I am setting myself a timer to hold myself accountable. And here we go. This is called The Root in the Dark. I stare at the translation in front of me, wondering why the page is refusing to burst into flames. Quite ballsy, really. I've been giving it my best death stare for the better part of 20 minutes. It's an award-winning death stare, too. Known to make first years cry and grown men's erections go instantly flaccid. And yet, this poem is still staring back at me, dangling my perfect GPA on a piece of fishing line. I could fuck this up for you, it taunts, if you want to get freaky like that. It sounds just like Professor Fernandez. His words from class earlier, as he handed back our quizzes, still sizzle. Ladies, I know you'd all rather be painting your nails, but you've really got to study harder next time. With that god-awful leer toward the back of the room where Carrie Tilden sits, batting her thick eyelashes at him and hanging on his every word. I'd looked around the room for an ally, anyone to confirm my feeling that, no, that is not an okay thing to say to a classroom of adolescents. But with Libby sitting too far behind me for me to subtly catch her eye, I got nothing. Everyone just mooning over the young professor with the floppy dark hair and piercing blue eyes, no matter what comes out of his mouth. What kind of 30-ish single man voluntarily cloisters himself at an all-girls boarding school in the mountains? Shouldn't he be terrorizing 22-year-old women with pickup lines at some dimly lit hipster bar in a college town, impressing them with his blinding smile and his PhD? If I could hex his dick into a little raisin nub, I would. But as it is, magic isn't real. Item number 407 on the list of ways boarding school is not like Hogwarts. And I've still got this assignment. So fine, here we go. Line 1. Sucede que me cansó de ser hombre. Dutifully, taking at least 60% more time than I need to form each letter into perfect cursive, I translate. It's happened that I grew tired of being a man. I dropped my fountain pen on the standard issue dormitory desk, harder than necessary. What does this Neruda fucker have to be tired of being a man about? Poor baby, he started feeling safe wherever he goes? Or earning fair wages? Or having a sexual encounter end when he says it does, when he's extracted his pleasure from it? Fuck that, I'm tired of being a girl. No, scratch that as well. I'm tired of being a human. The capacity to think is exhausting. I want to be a goldfish. I tilt my head forward and let my long curly hair form a private dressing room for my face. I wish my hair had my back like this all the time. Usually, all it does is get me unwanted attention. Thick, down to my butt, and raven dark with reddish sheen. It's always one of the first things people, mostly middle-aged women and boys who don't know how to talk to girls like they're human, comment on when they meet me. My mom's friends, with their limp bleach blonde, love to crow about how unique it is. Read different, read strange, read making my mom feel interesting for having given birth to the offspring of a Turkish stranger she met in a pub while touring the continent, as she calls it, as though it were 1865. When my mom came back from her tour, pregnant with no intention of tracking down or marrying the father, it scandalized her uptight old money family so thoroughly that it took Grandpa till I was 2 years old to hold me. You'd think it might have been a turning point for Mom, that this act might have given her a taste for sticking to her guns and shown her what a monumental fascist asshole her father was, and led her to, I don't know, move us to the States and send me to public school like the kids on TV. Stop asking me when I'm gonna find a boyfriend. Something, anything that lives up to this lone act of rebellion. But no, it's as if she used up all her fuck you by birthing me and returned to being the nice, obedient heiress she was supposed to be. Or maybe I took all her fuck you with me on the way out of the birth canal. There's a smart knock on my door and Libby pokes her head in. Q, you done the Spanish lit homework yet? I tilt my head back over my desk chair so that I'm looking at her upside down, staring at the floating head of dirty blonde frizz, unstylish wireframe glasses, and sharp brown eyes in my doorway. If by done you mean have I stared at it and willed it to dematerialize off this plane of existence, then yes. Libby snorts and shoulders her too tall frame into my room, making herself at home on my bed. She fluffs the long pillow and arranges it just so against the white cinder block wall. Her abandoned rowing career asserts itself in her every movement, screaming its presence from her built-up shoulders and narrow waist and long frog legs that seem always ready to strike. Don't you want me anymore? The career shouts, desperate to be loved like it once was. We could have gone to the Olympics, you and I. We could have had something real. Libby ignores it in favor of pulling a fruit by the foot from her blazer pocket and chomping on one end with her big square teeth. I love her for the sheer unattractiveness of the gesture. Unlike 99% of the girls here, Libby never cares about how she looks. So like, she speaks out one side of her mouth as the other continues to gnaw. As far as I can tell, this dude is having like an existential moment where he wants to break down and cry, but also brutally murder everyone. And he's sitting there whining about it like a small man baby. I don't know, Q. Did you read the rest? Some of this kind of reminds me of you. I drop my jaw in half mock astonishment and throw the pillow I'd been hugging to my chest at her. She parries it easily with one arm and continues. Listen to this. It would be great to go through the streets with a green knife, letting out yells until I died of the cold. Weren't you just telling me last week that you wanted to walk slowly down the dorm hallway with a sharp nail file just to freak everyone out? I narrow one eye. I might have expressed interest in such an activity. And this part, I don't want to go on being a root in the dark, insecure, stretched out, shivering with sleep. And then that's why Monday, when it sees me coming with my convict face, blazes up like gasoline. This dude is like so overwhelmed with the inanity of daily life that he's fantasizing all these wonderfully creepy ways to fuck with people, to blow up his routine and what's expected of him. Call me crazy, but that sounds like someone I know. I slide off the desk chair onto the floor, my long hair the last thing to go. My pride and joy. Your best feature, Mom always said. Never cut it. Boys prefer long hair. Libby? What's the point? I just told you, numbnuts. The dude wants to knock off a nun by smacking her in the ear. No, not of the poem. Like, what's the point? We're here at school, right? We're expected to graduate, get married in a big floofy ceremony, start a precociously successful career, raise Ivy League children without taking a moment off work. What's the point of it all? What if we just didn't? There've got to be other ways to live. That was my 7-minute timer, but I have like a little bit left. Can I finish? I didn't get a no, so I'm gonna
Yes, go for it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jamie. She's quiet for a moment, just the thoughtful chewing of her solidified corn syrup product. Well, that all depends who you ask. My dad says I'm here to study hard and practice hard and carry on the family athletic legacy. You told him you quit career yet? Shh, don't interrupt. You asked me for a monologue and damn it, you're gonna get one. And no, I haven't. Where was I? If you ask my mom, I'm here at this highly ranked elite institution of classical learning so I can meet a guy to marry who's gonna make a lot of money and sire my pedigreed children. I snort. She continues. Professor Torres says we're here to expand our minds. Gina down the hall thinks it's to try every drug we possibly can. She pauses and tongues the end of her fruit by the foot into her mouth. I think the point, my beautiful friend, is whatever the fuck you want it to be. I sit on that, staring at the roughly finished ceiling, patched in a million places from generations of scholars before me, trying dumb shit like putting a mirror on the ceiling. Libby, why did you quit crew? She's quiet for so long that I have to twist around to confirm she hasn't spontaneously developed adult onset narcolepsy. I guess I needed to know that I could exist without it, that it wasn't my whole being, that I have redeeming qualities other than being tall and strong and freakishly good at pulling an oar through water. Yeah, how's that going? She tilts her hand back and forth in front of her like a seesaw. Medium. Sometimes I think I made the biggest mistake of my life. I'm sure I'll feel that way when I have to tell my dad. And I do miss it, being out on the water before dawn, that feeling of power, being in perfect sync with other humans. So in other words, my personal hell. Libby chucks the pillow back at me. I dodge what certainly would have been a knockout blow. We're quiet for a moment. I sit up and gather my knees against my chest. Was it hard? I ask. Yes and no. I've been rowing since before I could walk. My whole family rows. My dad was always talking about when you row in college, blah, blah, blah. It had really and truly never occurred to me that it was an option not to. One day, the idea just popped into my head, but what if you didn't? You could write poetry. You could go to architecture school. You could actually do anything you wanted. It is, in fact, your life. She takes a deep breath and looks down at me. Once I had that idea in my head, I couldn't get it out. I had to see what it would be like. I rolled that around in my head. I guess when you think about it, how much stuff are we doing every day just because we've always done it without ever thinking why? I asked the pockmarked ceiling. Homework, saying the Pledge of Allegiance, listening to teachers, doing stuff that looks good on college applications, studying for the SAT, eating. Oh, don't get crazy there, Q. Food's amazing. We don't need to know why. You're absolutely right. Think about all the amazing food that's out there that we don't know exists. Probably cool shit like peanut butter with sardines and chocolate-covered ants. I snort, rolling over onto my belly so I can grin up at her. A thought hits me, still half-formed when it comes out my mouth. Hey, Libby? Yes, buddy? Will you cut my hair? Short? You serious? I think so. It's never seemed like an option. Everyone always tells me it's so pretty and I'm supposed to want to be pretty. But like, I could just cut it. My mom's words to me before my first day and my first year here flashed through my head. Take your hair down, there's lots of cute boys here. You'll want to make an impression. Do you think it'll repel potential husbands? Probably not, but it'll look badass. We're talking like short? Let's fucking do it. Give me scissors and a towel, stat. I gather the supplies and settle in my desk chair with a towel around my shoulders before I can think about it too hard. That hair to my butt as long as I can remember, since I was physically capable of growing it that long. Since boys tried to kiss me on the playground and grown men told my mom I was jailbait and she giggled. Since the old man in the park came too close and told me he wanted to take me back to his apartment and fuck me because it's right there on the next block and he's a war veteran and doesn't he deserve it? I rub the ends of my hair between my fingers, crack a smile at the thought of it being gone. Libby's low, excited voice booms above my head. Ready, chick? I make eye contact with her in the mirror, deep brown irises made of molten lava. I nod. She makes the first snip. Thanks.
That wasn't an extra 7 minutes. I want more.
That's it. That's it for that one. Thank you. Thanks for letting me finish. I was like, I can't stop here.
No, when you were cliffhanging in the middle, both Chris put in, please finish. I love this. And I was like, no, you gotta keep going.
Thank you.
So yes, so thank you for finishing. And I love that at some point she wants to be a goldfish just so she doesn't have to think about anything.
Yeah, like don't you ever get jealous of animals where you're just like you look at your cat and you're like, you don't have to think about shit. Like that's so nice. Like especially now it's just like there's too
Just
much
happens.
like we don't
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. Are you working on something right now that you want to share about?
I'm working on a rewrite of the novel that I've been working on for a little bit. So I had submitted to agents, got some feedback, and I'm working on those changes. So I'm gonna be re-querying hopefully in the next month or two. So if there are any agents listening that enjoy young adult speculative fiction, hi.
Hopefully there is somebody out there.
They're out there somewhere.
They're out there somewhere. Yeah, exactly. And I do love the young adult perspective from your voice there. It was much better than my high school experience also. Well, I think Jenny's going to bring everybody back in on the screen here. And we did have a question submitted for Laurel while we were all kind of listening in. So I want to be sure to address that question before we go. But just a reminder, please do check out Writers and Books at wab.org. They've got visiting authors coming up, workshops, and all kinds of virtual readings as well. And if this doesn't tell you how wonderful a virtual reading can be, I don't know what else can be. So I also want to be sure to thank our interpreters, Heather and Allie, tonight. It's such an honor to be able to have that happen while everybody's reading and to just be able to provide that to our audience as well. And I, as a visual person, love watching interpreters. I grew up watching one at a place that I went very frequently. And so it's just wonderful to have that be part of my listening experience as well. So Laurel, the question that came in for you is Disney stories are often critiqued for being very heteronormative. Can you tell us a bit about what led you to rewrite a Disney princess as a queer love interest?
That's a really, really good question. And I'm actually like a huge, huge Disney fan. So it's even more interesting because like I've seen all the movies, I know all the songs. I grew up on Disney. But again, like I'm also bisexual. I also like women. I'm queer. So I recognize that there's like a gap in representation there. So I think for me, maybe writing the story was probably kind of a way for me to reckon with that part of my identity that really, really loves Disney, but also recognizes that it is like this really heteronormative space. So I think I was kind of just trying to create like a space for myself there, and not just Disney, but like fairy tales in general, where, you know, we deserve to have these types of stories as well, like queer people obviously do. So, and obviously like I didn't grow up with a lot of queer love story examples, you know, reading in the media I was consuming, whatever. So I guess for me, it's just a way to kind of try to change that and try to create the types of stories that I maybe would have wanted to see or needed to see like when I was growing up. So yeah, thanks for the question. That was awesome.
That's a great answer. And it's a great lead-in to saying that our Image Out Film Festival is October 8th through 18th this year. And it's really always a fantastic experience to be able to watch cinema that is reflective of the community that I am a part of, that I would assume that a lot of us are a part of here tonight. To be able to see yourself in media and reflected in literature and in film and in art is really a powerful experience. So I do hope that those of you who are able to join us at the film festival this year, it is going to be virtual. And I'm not exactly sure, there's some talk of virtual, but there might be like a virtual fence around it where you have to be in a certain area. But there are lots of film festivals going on, and I encourage you to seek them out and participate, even though they are virtual, just so that you are supporting your community organizations, but also so that you have that life experience of really getting to see different stories and hear them as well. So please join us again on September 17th for our next ImageOutWrite readout event. Lots of outs in all of our titles. And be on the lookout at imageout.org so that you can see what else is coming up from our organization. Thank you again to all of our fabulous readers tonight, Rosie, Rick, Laurel, Christopher, and Shelley. Thank you, Chris from Writers and Books, for joining us. Thank you again to our interpreters, and thank you to Jenny, who's behind the scenes running this Zoom crazy webinar. It's really wonderful. Anybody need to say a hello or anything like that to friends and family?
No, just thank you so much for having all of us. This was just really a beautiful, beautiful evening. Wonderful to be a part of, seriously.
Thank you.